Hey, welcome to Clarksville Vibe the show where we tell the stories about people here in Clarksville, Tennessee who make this place the greatest place to live in America. I'm your host, Kevin Kennedy Jr., local pediatric dentist here in town. I'm a Clarksville native, been around almost my whole life, and get to call Clarksville home now. So excited about meeting people all over town who are doing great and amazing things. And my job on this show is to bring people to you so you can hear their stories, hear the great businesses that they run, the organizations that they founded, the nonprofits that they get to be a part of, and just get to kind of hear behind the scenes about how it all works. And of course, when we ask what makes Clarksville the greatest place to live in America, we always say it's the people. So this show is all about getting behind the scenes on the people. And today's guest is another in a long list of guests who have just made this show really, really fun to be a proud of. As always, thank you so much for your feedback. Constantly getting more and more feedback as I see people out in town at our local restaurants, at parties and things like this that we go to. And just all of your feedback to me has just been very welcome. Thank you so much for that. And as always, feel free to leave comments, leave us a like, a subscribe, review, whatever that you do on the online platform that it may suggest. That really helps us grow this positive image of Clarksville. And that's really what we're about here, is positivity, sharing great news from the good people here who live in our community. Well, my guest today is Laurel Judd. She is someone that I've had penciled in for a long time. She is really a dynamic personality. She is a rock star mom, rock star business owner, rock star community member who is a great connector of people. There's not too many people who she doesn't meet with just this big emphatic smile, a warm embrace. My wife should have probably done the introduction for her because she goes on and on about how amazing Laurel is. She's got a great story to share that I'm not going to get too in the weeds about, but she's been here for several years and is now a small business owner in our community. So I'm really excited to bring her story here for you to hear more about today. Laurel, thanks so much for being on the show.
Wow, thank you so much. That almost made me cry. Got to live up to those standards. Hey, everyone, I'm Laurel Judd, and I'm the owner of Pure Sweat and Float Studio in Clarksville. And yes, your wife is a good friend of mine, and I appreciate that. You want me to tell you a little bit about like how I started this business?
I want to hear about what the business is, because you say Pure Sweat Float Studio, and you're probably going to have a little bit of a generational gap of people who are like, ooh, I didn't know we had one of those. That's amazing. Where is it? And then you have people who are probably on the other end of like, what are you floating in? You know, is it on the river? Is it on a float? So tell us a little bit about high level, what is the business and what does it do?
Yeah. So infrared saunas are going to be like a regular sauna, well, different, but if you've been in a sauna, it's similar to that. It's about 147 degrees, and it has 3 different wavelengths. So it's near, mid, and far, and each of those wavelengths do a different thing. We've got 5 of those, and they're very healing. I could go into all the scientific evidence with that. It actually healed my Hashimoto's. But it's going to heat you on a core cellular level. So it heats the inside of you versus the outside air. And then we've got 2 magnesium float tanks, and those are super cool. It's like the Dead Sea. You're effortlessly floating in about 1,200 pounds of Epsom salt. But what's really cool about it, it's the only time you don't have outside stimulus coming in. So just imagine you're floating, so you don't have pressure on your joints. And you even have pressure on your joints when you're sleeping. Yeah. So you're just effortlessly floating, but you're also meditating and hearing your inner voice. I mean, we've got music, we've got guided meditation, we've got stars on the ceiling, but the goal is to eventually quiet your mind, because all of us are so busy, we don't have time to quiet our mind. So there you go.
Yeah, that's really cool. Very unique to Clarksville, right? This is a part of a bigger organization. So this is not something that is just, hey, you're winging it out of Clarksville, Tennessee. You're backing this up with lots of data, lots of best practices from other types of studios like this all around the country, and really bringing something new to Clarksville, but innovative and something that's unique and helping people get healthy. Tell us a little bit about, when you first became exposed to this idea of, let's even say, infrared sauna, right? So how'd you hear about that for the first time?
Yeah, well, it all came about after I got my breast implants removed, and I was seeing a functional medicine doctor, actually Dr. Cliff Snier, who's here at Maxwell Clinic in Clarksville. And he said, I want you to go to an infrared sauna. And at the time, there were no infrared saunas here. So I just Googled it, and Pure Sweat Float Studio in Belmead came up.
Oh, yeah.
And I just headed over there. I got someone to watch my daughter, and for 3 days in a week, I used that infrared sauna. So I think it was like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, because they told me try and use it the 3 sessions within 10 days, because then you can actually get the lymphatic drainage going. And what I noticed is after that 3rd session, I was in the sauna and I couldn't move. Like prior to that, because of my Hashimoto's, I felt my whole back unhinge and it actually cracked. And after that, I'm like, wow, I mentally feel better and I physically feel better. I think we're on to something. And then I started floating, and floating was incredible. It really helped with my insomnia. And I just couldn't meditate, but it really got me in the practice of chilling out and like figuring out what's going on inside me. I didn't know who I was. So that was kind of the start of the practice.
Wow. Shout out to Cliff for what a great idea.
Yes. He's with Risen Wellness, actually.
Risen Wellness. And so from that, is that where you then got exposed to the float aspect of it as well?
Yeah. Well, actually, so I hadn't floated. I was a therapist on post. So licensed clinical professional counselor, certified alcohol drug counselor for the military. And I used to send my clients, my soldiers, to go floating because it would help them if they didn't want to see a therapist, or it was actually created originally for guys with PTSD, or I should say females and males. And so they would go float, and this is before I ever tried it, but they'd say, Laurel, it's all the way in Nashville. I'd have to drive all the way back. So here I am relaxed, excuse me, but then I'd have to drive in Nashville traffic. So I'd be stressed out on the way home.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, yeah.
Oh, wow. So how did you make that connection, let's say in your therapy role, to floating as a treatment modality or like a part of a plan for some of our soldiers and veterans?
What I found, and it really hit me after I kind of went through, not to knock Western medicine, but after I went through my own journey of not really getting answers through Western medicine. And also the soldiers would say to me, I don't want to take any more pills. Like, what are some natural things I could do to help de-stress or just focus more? And so floating came up because I would research it, and that's really how I came about it. And I think a soldier actually brought it to my attention at one point. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, let's talk about a little bit of that journey of your role as a therapist, specifically here at Fort Campbell, because that was a part of your professional journey as well. So tell us a little bit about how you kind of got into that role originally, and why was it important for you to serve in that role with current soldiers or veterans or the people that you were able to meet?
So I'm a 3rd generation Army wife, and I started at Fort Bragg.
Okay.
And never dated anyone in the military, but of course, the first guy I date that's in the military, I end up marrying, and that's just how life goes. I was living in Chicago, and I was a therapist there working at a methadone clinic, actually. And I just wasn't that happy. I didn't want to live in a big city, and my dad was like, you know what, I think it's time that we try and get you in the military, the GS sector, because it's really hard to get in if you don't know someone. And so they're like, we have an opening at Fort Bragg. Would you like to go? And I had no idea where Fort Bragg was, but I ended up going. And I think like a month into it, I was at a bar, met my husband. He's a Green Beret. And, it was
as those
quick,
stories go.
Exactly. And then he said, well, I actually got assigned to Fort Campbell. Would you like to go with me? And I'm like, sure. And so I transferred the GS job from Fort Bragg to Fort Campbell, and worked there for almost 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah, and I loved it.
Yeah. So what were some of the things that you were maybe passionate about, or, what were some of the challenges that people were bringing to you that you were then able to meet them in that need?
Yeah. People think this is crazy. I do really well working with addicts, and maybe because of my codependent nature, we just go well together in an unhealthy way. But I have to say, like, I got such good feedback, and I think it's because I provided a space that was non-judgmental, but I also could be a source of truth. So a lot of people don't want to hear the truth, but if you say it in the right way and you gain their trust, then you're golden. So helping addicts really see that, and I'm a blunt person if you don't know that, so I can completely be myself with addicts, especially male soldier addicts, because I can just get to their level and be honest with them, and they really appreciated that. So I would say that, and just any kind of anxiety or depression, I really have a heart for that. So, and so many people have it now.
So from my naive perspective as a civilian, no relation to the military whatsoever, are these services that soldiers are seeking out on their own? Are they ordered to come? You know, in Hollywood, it's kind of this picture of the soldier that we see sometimes is like, no, you're going to go see this therapist. You're going to go see this, you know, mental health expert because you've got to get this fixed. Are they ordered to come see you? Are they seeking the services on their own? How does that work?
So I would say 50-50.
Okay, yeah.
I worked at a place called the Army Substance Abuse Program. Okay. So a lot of times, unfortunately, they got a DUI or they got in trouble. They popped hot, as they call it. So tested positive for marijuana or whatever, cocaine. So a lot of times they were forced to come see me. But there were some that came voluntarily. The only issue is once you voluntarily go, no matter what they say, you don't want a soldier, it's like you want them to get help, but then once they get the help, then if something were to happen to them, they might not deploy them, they might flag them. So it's a tough situation. Yeah. But yeah, most of them I'd say were ordered to see me.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's cool though, you know, to have the skill and the personality and the demeanor to be able to connect with someone, because I'm sure most of them were probably not thrilled if they'd been ordered to be there. And, you know, it's kind of a part of their deal that they've got to do to, I guess, be, you know, reinstated back to their good standing if that was a thing. But very thankful to have people like yourself who are skilled and talented and, you know, have the ability to connect with people, because regardless if they want to be there or not, it's a hard journey, and it's a hard journey to get and receive help. And we all know our military men and service women, we need them to be in the best shape possible, and it includes their whole body, their whole self, to bring into their work to help keep our community safe.
Absolutely. And I also realized too, it's not just about the soldier, him or himself, it's about the family. So it affects everyone in the family. So for me now, even though I'm not working on post, my goal is to help the whole family.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, my husband's gone right now. He's gone all the time. And so I don't know if I mentioned this, but working on post, I worked with Green Berets, which is what my husband is, Special Forces, EOD, which is Engineering Ordnance, and then 160th. So it was mostly the Spec Ops community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask you that. So you're working as a therapist, but you also have this dual role as a wife of a soldier, Spec Ops guy, and you're naturally connected to these other spouses, right? And so you have this professional, personal blend rollover. So what was that like, having the skills and the talents, the knowledge and the expertise that you have in these areas, but then just trying to be Laurel, you know, just trying to be a wife who fits in with the group and socializes, but yet supports, because there's real needs that go on. And how did you kind of overcome the challenge of not allowing that to be all consuming?
I think I still am. I'm going to be honest with you. I think it's funny you just hit on that. That's actually a really sensitive spot to me, because I think one of my main goals that I'm working on, like even to this day as a human, is just being okay with who I am and not needing that outside approval. Because so many of us worry so much, like, what is this person going to think? And you know, as a small business owner, like, you might offend someone without even knowing it. Yeah. So yes,
totally unintentionally.
I know, right? So that's a really good question. It was very hard for me, and only because sometimes I'd be seeing their husbands. And so I didn't know them close enough. If I did, I would hand them off to someone else. But if I know someone as an acquaintance, and then all of a sudden I'm in a situation where I'm socializing with the family, it is uncomfortable. And I think my husband always knew he wouldn't say anything, because I would act just a little bit more uptight or robotic like. So it was difficult, and that's ultimately one of the reasons I got sick. But I just started knowing too much. It's a pretty small community, and it just didn't feel right. And it was, once I had my daughter, just the amount of PTSD and postpartum, it was a little too much for me. So I knew when to bow out.
Sure.
I'll say that.
Yeah. Is the word or phrase secondary trauma, do you feel like that's a applicable spot to maybe put yourself in? Like, you were a caregiver for a really, really heavy burden of this community, and yet it was maybe hard for you to shake that off somewhat.
Yeah. You know, it wasn't really that difficult until I had my daughter. And I think because I was so tired, and I really wasn't around a lot of kids And I was the youngest in my family. I never babysat. Once I had my daughter, my heart just exploded. So when I'd hear anything, just soldiers tell about like, I abused my kid. I didn't mean it. I mean, I couldn't get it out of my head. So that was one part. But yes, secondary trauma is a real thing. If you're living with someone that's constantly having nightmares, or maybe they wake up in the middle of the night and they go and they choke out their wife. I mean, that is very traumatic. You do not feel safe in your own home. So these are stories that I would hear all the time. Luckily, that didn't happen in my house, but I could say that when you love someone and you see them go through something over and over and over, it is going to affect you. And then once you have kids and you're supposed to protect them from this person that you love, and then you don't know if they're going to be okay, it's a lot. It's heavy stuff. Yeah.
How do you feel like community members in general, because I do feel like Clarksville citizens, civilians, generational civilians like myself, we want to be supportive of our military servicemen and women, but there's still a distance that needs to be there because we don't understand everything. We're not going to understand everything, but yet there are ways that we can help support without knowing full details. So, you're a spouse, but you're also a provider to some of these people that have a history of that. What does that look like for you, or how would you recommend someone who really wants to serve the military families in our community as a civilian? What would be some suggestions that you would offer?
That's a really good question. I mean, I'm thinking monetarily because whenever we get veterans, they're like, do you give a discount? Which we're a veteran-owned business, and yes, we do. But, it's difficult to answer because a lot of soldiers will say, I just want to be treated like everyone else. And you have to understand, if someone, especially in a spec ops community, they're deploying all the time and they're seeing stuff all the time. So that transition, they always say, like, I'm exposed to all this stuff. And then 2 days later, I could be home with my family. So maybe just have grace. If you hear that they do something that maybe isn't accepted in the civilian world, instead of judging them, think, you know what, I can't even imagine what they're going through. And maybe I'd say have grace and treat them like anyone else. But, and it's different too, because some people want to be thanked for their service and other people don't. So it's just, I don't know, just maybe, hey, if there's anything I can do to help you, even though they probably won't say. Right. And I'm trying to think of my husband, what he would want. But he is a little different because he is a Green Beret, and they kind of are different. I think they have a higher threshold for trauma, for exposure, because they have to go through so much training. So I think for him, he'd probably say, like, take care of my family when I'm gone. Yeah. So if you can, like, for example, Life Point Church delivered groceries when Evan was gone. Like, that made a huge difference to me. Right. So Stephanie and Mike Burnett, shout out to them. During COVID, Evan was deployed. They really helped me. Yeah. And so I'd say helping the families while they're gone is a big deal. Yeah.
It's a fantastic suggestion.
Like babysitters, that's really hard to find.
Right.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. And especially if if you're operating a business and, he happens to leave unexpectedly, you don't get a lot of notice. Like, you've got certain demands that have to be met, and, your daughter still needs to be cared for, and you still got to have a trusting, honest, open relationship with this babysitter to, leave her and for her to be cared for. So I do understand that for sure. Well, tell us a little bit about, you've mentioned this a couple times, your own health journey and how that led you into, the float, the infrared spa business. But, what did you learn from that, and how do you bring that into your business? Because not everyone, I would assume, who owns a float business around the country has this same journey, but you bring personal experience into probably how you hire, how you charge fees, how you set things up, how you market, how you do everything, because you've seen it personally in your own life. So tell us a little bit about that journey, and then how did you bring that as like your whole self into creating the business? Yeah,
that's a really good question. And you hit on every key point. So after I had my daughter in 2017, I got really sick. I'll kind of tell you the backstory. And prior to that, super healthy, Division I athlete, never faced any
issues. Play?
Tennis at UConn.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Nice. Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's okay. Another fun fact.
Yeah.
But after I had my daughter, and Evan was deployed the entire pregnancy, he came back for like 2 months. And I really didn't know anything about anything but Western medicine. Yeah. So I was 37 when I had her, and I don't know if you know this, but I'm considered geriatric when I have a kid at that age. So all I heard was like, you're old, you're high risk. And I'm like, look, I'm healthy. But they actually scheduled when I was going to deliver. And I think that was the starting point of like bad health care that I was given, because I think naturally I probably could have had my daughter, but I didn't know anything. So I just listened to the doctor. Had a C-section. They had to do like a spinal tap. They couldn't find the right place. Then I was allergic to the medication. So the whole process of having my daughter was pretty traumatic. Then my husband had to leave 2 weeks later. That C-section, they nipped my bladder. I had to wear cath for like a month, and I was by myself, and I had to go back to work 12 weeks later. Started getting really sick, and I kept going to the doctor, and he kept saying to me, you just have postpartum depression. Take some Zoloft. I'm like, yeah, I'm a therapist. I've never taken it, so I better not be too, like, I'm too good for this. So I started taking it, and I'm like, man, I still don't feel good. Like, I know my body. Like, mentally, I'm sure I have postpartum, but I physically don't feel well, and no one was believing me. So I finally demanded that he give me, like, physical CBC. And he's like, wow, you actually really have some alarming CBC results. I'm like, thank you for listening. Anyway, they started looking into things. I had 7 iron infusions. They started giving me basically like a Band-Aid for everything. But I'm like, there's got to be a root cause to this. Eventually, I had to quit my job or resign from it. And then I started going down the rabbit hole of like functional medicine, holistic medicine. And really strangely enough, this one of my friends who's a special forces wife was a nurse. She became a holistic nurse. And she said, not to be too personal, but do you have breast implants? And I said, yeah, what does that have to do with anything? And she said, there's something called breast implant illness, and I think that you have it. You have every symptom, and I've been watching you for a month, and I just want you to look into it. So I went on this website. Sure enough, it was
What a good
Facebook
friend.
page. I know,
For,
right?
you know, for the record.
Elizabeth Moline.
Yeah.
Love her. That's actually one of my biggest shout outs because
Wow.
she's still a good friend of mine.
Yeah.
She lives by me. Her husband's special forces. She'll do anything for me. But yeah, so, and once again, speaking the truth, even though it's hard, is probably the best thing any of us can do for each other in this community.
Sure.
But yeah, so I forgot where I was, but eventually I got them out, and it's actually a unique procedure. You can't just get your breast implants out. You actually have something called an en bloc capsulectomy. It's like a $20,000 surgery. They actually have to take, your body forms a capsule around this implant. And so naturally, if it's a foreign object in your body, it's going to start like, not calcifying, but like forming stuff around it within like a month of it being in your body. So a specialized doctor has to go in and like cauterize that off your body, because that's what's holding the heated up silicone. If you don't take that capsule out, you're going to have the melted silicone still in your body. So got that taken out, and like I felt like crap for 2 years because my body was detoxing all of this stuff. But thank goodness I had the support from like the Facebook community of breast implant illness, or we call it BII people. And then through that, that's where I met Cliff, and he's like, you need an infrared sauna. Started going to Pure Sweat and Float. And then it was like light bulb in my head. I'm like, this is what I want to do, because I miss helping people, but I want to have this physical space to call my own, where I take in this holistic mind, body, spirit. It can't just be one. If it's one, it's not going to work. So that's how it came about. And I was the second franchisee. And now there's like 15 nationwide.
And you were number 2. Wow.
Yeah.
And the first one was Belle Meade? Oh, wow. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So are you like the poster child of Pure Sweat, and they like, you know, point people to you if you know, somebody in Colorado is interested in opening one, they're like, you should meet Laurel.
They do, because I'm so passionate about it. And there's like this grit story to mine.
Yeah, because you're not doing it because of the ROI.
No.
Like, it's not like, oh, this is a, you know, low investment, we can.
Right.
It's not like you're opening I shouldn't even say a name because I don't want to insult anybody, but you're not opening Whataburger. Like, we've got these margins or whatever. Like, you found a niche of something that you were passionate about, and then, okay, let's just make it work. And so I'm sure as a high level entity, they're super thrilled to have somebody like you as a franchise owner that they can point people to and say, this is how she makes it work.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, Candace is the founder of Pure Sweat and Float, and she and I became really good friends. And I was really worried because, you know, Evan and I don't come from, or I should say, he and I don't have a ton of money. So I'm like, does she want me to be a franchisee? I had to take a loan from a bank. And thank you to Planners Bank for believing in us, because they were like, what the hell is this? But we're still going to give you the money to do it. And now they're so happy they did.
Do you remember who you worked with at Planners?
Will Sanders. He's awesome.
Will Sanders.
Do you know him?
Oh, of course.
I love
Yes.
Will.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for believing in me. But we just have such a good team. And as you know, it takes a village for anything like this to happen. And what makes us different, I wanted to go back on that versus there are other float studios like Float Nashville or whatever, not to knock them, but the great thing about Pure Sweat and Float, which fits me so well, is it is an experience. So we call our employees shepherds of the space. Like all day long, we have to make decisions. So I treat and I tell my staff, like, direct people, tell them what to do. When you go to a place and they're like, take off your shoes, I recommend this, I would put this on. But I mean, people are just like, thank you so much, I haven't been treated like this. Like for once, I don't have to make a decision.
You have dummies like myself. I went to try it out. You've never done it before, right?
Yes.
So I'm going to the infrared sauna. I'm like, okay, it's not the athletic club. Like, you're like, do you wear clothes? Do you not wear clothes? Like, am I allowed to ask this question? I certainly don't want to be the guy not wearing clothes when you're supposed to be wearing clothes. You know, so it's like you have no idea what you're going. Where do you leave your shoes? Where am I supposed to put my keys?
Yeah.
You know, it's a whole new deal. And I do remember they were just very accommodating. And I'm like playing the awkward uncle, like, just tell me what to do. I heard this was cool, so I want to try, you know. But they were very, very welcoming.
Good.
So it's great that you do that. I'm glad to hear from like a business owner's perspective, you know, how you create a space, how you create a process in every little individual business, whether it's installing gutters or running a spa or running a dental clinic. Like most of your client base is uninformed of what you're doing. So a lot of what you're doing is educating.
Yeah, it's true. We do have a lot of people from California moving here, though, that are like avid floaties or floaters. So we've got that.
They're like checking you out. Like,
right.
Yeah.
And speaking of
what kind of magnesium?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. They're like, I've done this, but it's half the price here. One of the funny stories about like, should I wear clothes? Should I not? We've had two situations, and one was like an older guy, and he just started walking through our studio naked. We're like, sir, you got to put a towel on.
Yeah.
But he was so comfortable. But I'm like, I'm glad you feel comfortable.
That was not me, for the record.
We're like, but I will say some of the things I look for, because we are a part of a franchise. So like we have to use a color scheme, and there's obviously like paperwork and policies that we have to follow, but they give us the ability to really like, one, have our own touch to the style, because it is Clarksville. We are not Belle Meade, even with our marketing and promotions. But also, I teach my staff, it's so important. One, you have to be okay being independent and learning how to sell. You aren't just selling tequila, you're selling stuff that's going to help people on their wellness journey. And we get all sorts of people. We get people who all of a sudden walk in and they just start crying. You know, this is finally the place where you just walk in and you've been there. It's beautiful, but it's also calming. And sometimes people have been so busy, it's the first time they can just kind of let go and they don't even realize it. So a staff that's mature enough that can actually handle if someone cries, and just really be knowledgeable. There's a plethora of information that goes with it. And I think that's the thing. This is not just a spa where you give massages. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but people, if they're looking to just work at a place where, you know, here, I'm going to take you to your room, that's not it. This is about like telling my story, healing, and helping people on their journey. And every person's journey is going to look totally different. Yeah. So, and like our mission statement is to provide the cleanest, safest, most luxurious space in Clarksville while healing the community.
Oh, nice. Did you come up with that on your own?
I did.
Nice. Yeah, that's cool.
Thank
while
you.
Healing the community.
Yeah.
I love that. Off the top of your head, so give us 2 or 3 like target demographics of people that you would say, hey, you may have never done this before, but this could be really helpful for your life.
Man, there's so many. I mean, obviously I'm always going to work toward the military, but I think most military people actually know about us, but still I'm always going to push them. And this is such a transient town, so people are coming in and out all the time. I'm always going to push the mother who is like just stressed out. I know you don't want to be away from your kids, but that hour you're away and you're taking care of yourself, you're going to be that much more refreshed to be nicer to your kids, to be kinder.
And do you feel like there's an equivalent difference there, or like an equivalent experience between the sauna and the spa, or the sauna and the float?
Yeah, they're The same and different.
Okay.
So sauna, I would say you could still use your phone. You can go with or without someone. So you're getting all these physical benefits, and you have more of the freedom to be like, okay, I'm going to make it with, total silence, not have my phone. But so many people bring their phones in, and like when you're in the float, you cannot use your phone. I mean, it would be really bad too. You'd be floating and using your phone. So I think if you're really trying to de-stress, the float will force you to.
Yeah. That's pretty interesting, because when I did the sauna, I'm like, well, I'm not going to just sit here and think in my own brain. Like, I'm going to make this productive time. So like I pulled up a podcast and I was like, this is a podcast that I've been wanting to listen to. I remember exactly what, Craig Rochelle podcast, like how to communicate better or whatever it is. Like I'm here like self-improvement, but it never clicked in my brain to actually disconnect. Yeah. Like my brain never stops. Every available moment is like, okay, what can I hit next on the list? What can I do in this time? Like, ooh, I found 15 minutes. I've got 10 different things I can do. Let's see how many of them I can get done right now. But it wasn't until you just said that where you're just like, oh, you can actually just sit in your own thoughts. I'm like, that would be strange. I wouldn't even know what to do with that.
Which means you need it.
I probably need it. Yeah.
Yes. And so you never floated,
Stay
right?
On my business.
I know, right? Well, you're very type A and you're an entrepreneur.
I'm pretty tightly wound. And I'm self-aware of that, but it just is, I need more space I need to create the space to allow myself to unplug a little bit.
And what I would tell you with that is, like, for me, I sauna almost every single day, but I have a sauna in my house. So like for me, I think of it like this. I'm going to go in the sauna, and no matter what, I'm getting those physical benefits. So I know that no matter what, I'm not wasting my time. I'm getting that physical benefit. And if I decide I want to tune out and watch Netflix, I'm still tuning out of stress of my own brain. But I try and still take 10 minutes of maybe listening to Daily Calm, or just turning everything off, laying on the sauna bench and just chilling out, just like you would with the float. But with floating, there's something about water and forcing yourself, just floating, which you never get to have no pressure on your joints, but also that forced disconnect. That really, and it can be hard for people. So another thing, I cater it. If someone comes in and they say, I've got PTSD, I'm scared to death of these floats, versus someone who's like, yeah, I floated before for 60 minutes. I'm fine with it. I'm not, no issues. We're going to make their, we could say, medical plan different. It's like we're diagnosing, because we don't want that first experience to be traumatic for them. And if you put someone in a float with no light or no sound for 60 minutes, they're probably going to have a panic attack and never come back. So what's different about our float studio versus like another one is we hear what they have to say, and we make it so that their experience is the best, so that they come back, and then eventually they work slowly up to what they need to be, because that traumatic, like, just get rid of everything. That, if they're afraid of their own brain and they're just sitting there with no light or no sound, that could actually be pretty bad. So,
Well, what a gift to have you that has a clinical knowledge of the brain, but then also have this experience that I'm sure you wish you had rather not gone through, but you did, and now you get to bring this. You mentioned Will Sanders. You're kind of first generation business owner in this town. I'm curious who else along the way of pitching this idea, finding the space, decorating the space, marketing the business, like, who are some other people along the way that you'd say really played a critical role in helping you get where you are?
Well, obviously my husband, because if it weren't for him, I couldn't do it. Will Sanders, yes. Candace Bruder, the founder. I'm very appreciative. Mark Holloman is, like, I say, he's the god of everything. Do you know him, the realtor?
Of course.
He's
if
literally
you've been around here the whole time.
Yes.
He's
just been such a gift to us, and I always forget that, like, he's a big deal, but he's so humble, and he's
a big deal.
He's a big deal, and he's helped us. Like, he sold we bought our first house from him in 2012, and he still helps us. And I just think it's cool that, as busy as he is, he always finds the time, and in the back of his mind, he's just going to do what's best for us. Then I would say local Clarksville, Casey Bryant, she's been awesome. You and your wife have always been welcoming. Clarksville Chamber has been great to me. I'm at the military level. I do there once a month, Thursday. There's a lady named Catherine Bertoldi. I don't know if you know her, but
Of course I know
she's
Catherine.
okay. You know
Yeah,
everyone.
She works for a dental office.
She's so. Oh, that's right.
She
That's right.
Oh, okay. I said that incorrect. Let me just clear the record. She runs a dental office. She doesn't work for anyone. She is Catherine. She's an absolute legend in the dental community here.
She's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I know I'm missing people, but always Mark Holloman just shoots up as like such a gift. But
and what's great about his story is he is, a legend. He is kind of a blue blood. The name stands alone, right?
Totally.
And there's no level of pride or superiority to helping someone who maybe doesn't have the Clarksville connections, because he's as connected as anyone could be connected, right? And he just constantly open door, open heart, just here to help people. And here, the fact that he's done the trolleys and the this and has his hands in so many things. It's really warming, because I didn't know that you were connected to him in any way, right? But to hear, that story coming from you, I hope that I get to live a legacy and have the decades to accumulate where I get to be a part of a bunch of people's life like that. That's very cool.
You already are.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So let me end in this, business owner, you're a connector of people. You've just got this, great story. What is it about Clarksville that you decided to say, hey, we're actually going to plug and plant this in Clarksville? Because you could have opened your studio anywhere, you've got skills to go anywhere in the country, maybe not yet, but you could have said, hey, whenever he's done operating, we're going to do this and we're going to put it in Portland, Maine, because that's where we want to go. What was it about Clarksville that you just said, hey, we're going to stay here, we're going to call this our home, and we're going to fully invest in it?
Yeah, that's funny, because I just went to the float conference in Portland, Maine, and I really like it. It was so pretty. Cool. Yeah. It was very different, but I loved it. I didn't think of anywhere else. It's funny you asked that. One, Evan's in for the next 7 years, and Pure Sweat and Float, I don't think they would have let me open anywhere else, because at the time they weren't, nationwide, and I liked being close. And Clarksville's my home. I love it, and I love watching it grow. And another cool thing is that, one, I'm a military person, and I like that, especially in the Sango area, you're kind of a mix of a little bit of Nashville and high class, but you also will always have that veteran community, and that means a lot to me. I'm a third generation military wife, so that's my blood, but also there's so many women here with breast implant illness, so knowing that I can reach that. There's so many women in the South, especially with implants, that are sick. And so my mission wasn't to just heal the community, especially get the word out on breast implant illness, because it's not talked about. And a lot of people just feel like they're sick and their doctors aren't telling them why. So I want to spread as much information about it as possible. Yeah. And it's a mile from my house. So that combination is pretty cool. Yeah. And I didn't want to wait for 7 years. This is now or never.
Yes.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Clarksville's lucky to have you. We have been, from you serving in your role as a therapist there on base for several years, and then taking a chance on our community and bringing something brand new. I mean, that is what is cool to me, that this wasn't a second location for you. This isn't something that is done in 3 or 4 other spots in town, and you just decided to put one out in Sango. This is something that no one was doing here, no experience at all, and having the courage to educate the community on something that you're really passionate about, and then making the relationships in town to get it to work. Because like you said, when you're bringing a new product, you have to fight a lot of battles that someone else wouldn't necessarily have to do if they're doing something similar 15 years down the road, because now people know about it. So thank you for bringing your whole self to our community. And of course, we are very appreciative of your husband and everything that he does to keep our community and our nation safe. And thanks to your daughter as well, because, she gives a lot to our community by having her parents give us so much. So I want to say thanks for that. And it's always nice to see you around town. I see you everywhere. I saw you at the Austin P ticket thing the other day at the F&M Bank Arena. They were unveiling all the season tickets, and there's Laurel over there sharing her message. I didn't get to come say hey, but I
always talk about boobs. It's so inappropriate. And I was going to say one quick thing. We're opening studio number 2. Deborah Butts is another shout out. We're actually opening in her location on Trenton and 101st. That's going to have cold plunge. So I wanted to bring that up too.
Okay. What's the temp of the cold plunge?
We're going to have a 50-degree one and a 38-degree one.
Is that Fahrenheit?
Yes.
Okay,
So one
gotcha.
is like when you're starting off, and the other one's like, yeah, I can do this, and it's pretty cool. We'll get into that another time, but I'm really excited about that. So
Okay, so we're June-ish recording this, probably released July or August. So when should we expect that?
early next year.
Nice.
Yes.
Very cool.
Yes, I'm
Well,
excited.
that's exciting.
And thank you so much for
Look at
having
you,
me.
man, knocking things out of the park. Yeah. Well, hey, thanks to our audience as well. I am sure you've just thoroughly enjoyed this episode with Laurel. I've gotten to hear her story once again. Connected member of our community who has had, long ties to the military in several different ways. Small business owner, parent, health advocate, just a connector of people, just so many tags that go on her resume. And yet she does it with a smile. She does it with sincere passion. She does it with just integrity of who she is and gives the shout outs to people along the way. And so this is what our show is all about, bringing positive stories of people who are making a big difference in our community and making this place the best place to live in America. If you enjoyed this episode and you haven't heard the others, scroll back through all of them, find another one, just randomly jump right in. They are all just like this. We have amazing people in our community. Thankful for you to get to the end of this episode with Laurel today, and hope you enjoy the rest of them. Hey, send us a share if you happen to run into Will Sanders or Mark Holloman or all these people that she named. Make sure you say, hey, heard about you on the podcast, because we're really grateful for all they do in our community as well. But hey, we'll catch you on the next episode. I'm Kevin Kennedy. Thanks so much for joining us.